So welcome to this conversation on a contemplative path through the crisis. We're very happy and honored that Herman Van Rompuy, who has also given for earlier talks on this site, is with us for a conversation with Vladimir, Leo, Thomas, and Sarah, who are our editorial board for this site. I think we're all very conscious today that the health crisis is more than a health crisis. It has exposed deep fault lines in our culture and in our institutions. Many of these were being discussed and reflected upon long before COVID came, but COVID has accelerated the sense of urgency, which we feel with regard to, for example, democratic institutions, towards how government and people relate to each other, to the place of spirituality and the place of religious tradition in society globally and in our own cultures. So in this conversation, we'd like to open these questions, and Herman will, I think, be able, with a lifetime experience of government and a lifetime following a spiritual path as well, and with meditation as something that we all share, I think we can open these questions and bring some fresh air and some light. And what I'd like to begin with is just a short comment, which I'll invite others to follow on with. But this is on the nature of a contemplative mind and what is a contemplative consciousness. It does seem to me that the complexity of our situation and the high volume and lack of balance in the public discourse that is taking place calls for a new approach, a new mental state almost, in which we handle these problems, analyze them, and make decisions. And that's what I would call a contemplative consciousness, which is something that probably can't be studied or learned, but something that grows in us through fidelity, perseverance in a contemplative practice like meditation. So a contemplative mind emerges from that. And one of the characteristics of it, I think, is that we are able to deal with highly polarized situations, which often lead to anger and violence and disrespect and a lack of courtesy. We know all of this kind of language of opposition and conflict, and even the refusal to allow the other person the right to exist or express their opinion. And I think a contemplative consciousness allows us to be part of that without running away, making a contribution while not adding to the polarization. That very briefly is one of the characteristics of the contemplative mind, I think. I mean, it also involves things like understanding ourselves, self-knowledge, the restoring the spirit of joy to our life, even in times of suffering, and above all, enabling us to find meaning in complex and painful experiences. But that would be what I'd like us to look at, if we can, from our different perspectives. But maybe we can just go around briefly, and then we'll come to Herman and ask Herman to reflect on us and enter into a conversation. So, Sarah, would you like to begin?
Thanks, Laurence. I think my wondering is similar, but I'm interested in perhaps what we might learn from reflecting on experiences that Herman, but others of us have had of being in situations where there is the kind of polarisation or anger or kind of mutual hostility that you've been speaking about, Laurence, and actually intentionally being in those, with seeking to practice this contemplative mind, or this bring this contemplative energy to it, and what's actually happened. I think I'm interested in us perhaps exploring what we're discovering about the practice of that in these particular situations, and what that might illuminate about how we continue and how we participate in in politics, in public life, in public debate.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Thank you. There's a real crisis of trust even in the forum of these debates and the meaning of the democratic process. Yeah,
that's right. And so does it, I mean, it seems to me it's obvious in the abstract this should make a difference, but I'm interested in what our experience of that is in practice, and how it, does it, and what might we learn from that as well.
Great, thank you. Thomas.
I have to excuse myself. I don't want to be an interviewer, but I have to read it up in English. So, because I was thinking about last night, the example of the introduction of the president of the European Commission, for me, has shown that the European Union is partly led in a technocratic manner and is not exclusively based on a democratic decision-making process. And the circumstance was also evident in the self-sufficient approach of the individual countries at the beginning and also now during the Corona crisis. And with regard to the notes that Laurence forwarded to us from you, my question is a uniform procedure to be expected in the future, or how can a uniform canon of values be established in order to create a mutual understanding? That's my question. Because in the current situation, it's not always obvious that that this democratic decision-making process is lived in the institutions, which I recognize, and also people recognize that I'm discussing with them, or I'm talking with them.
So challenge to the institutions, and also the question is how do we build common values or recognize common values? Yeah.
Especially in the situation that we face now, that we have a union with different cultural backgrounds, with different religious backgrounds, and that's a challenge.
And also that values can be named, but sometimes hypocritically named, and there's no real commitment to living them out. Like one country refused to take any single refugee a couple of years ago, and when asked why, we were told in order to protect our Christian values. So, okay, so Leo.
So I think I'm interested to reflect, especially on this question about anger. Was reading, Herman reflection on the angry people, and also angry people that don't care if the politician is lying or if he's incompetent. They want to hear what they want to hear, and then they buy anything. And I think this is related with what is true, and if you think about what is misinformation. So they believe in this conspiracy because they don't care if it's true or not, but it is legitimizing and is feeding his anger. So I think it is it is a crucial part. Laurence, you're speaking of being contemplative. I think anger is unbalanced. No, so it is. I think the contemplative practice can help us to be in a point that be less angry, and then therefore we don't polarize too much, because the polarization is also fed by anger, and I can myself feel that. And when somebody I'm reading, Facebook comments, or it feeds your angers, and in technology also use that, this playing with the emotions and to polarize people.
Yeah. I think some of us have seen that documentary, The Social Dilemma, which is interviews with previous Silicon Valley executives who over the last 10 or 15 years created the social media that we have now, and have sort of confessed to the deep anxiety, a shame almost, that they feel, or responsibility they feel for having created a system immensely lucrative, but also very disturbing and dishonest at heart, really. Yeah. Vladimir.
It was said that the I think topic, or the keyword for today's situation all around the world is division and polarization. I wonder how also the religion, especially here in the European Union, the Christianity is. What is role of the religion in this process? Because it seems to me that the religion, the conservative strength, like in Poland and Hungary, support the conservative ideas, which are really, let's say, challenging and are connected with the populist strength. And also, I wonder, you were describing the contemplative approach to the reality and the politics, because it seems to me that the populist or the anger which or emotions produce the politics who are really let's say strong and loud and entertaining. So they are they amuse people, and it seems to be that the values which came from contemplative core, which kind of kindness or mindness, seems to me weaker against this wave of emotions and strength. So that's my perspective and interest.
Okay. The question of the role of religion in this in the contemplative approach, I suppose, and I'll pass over to you, Herman, but I suppose for most politicians and political institutions, religion only means institutional religion. It only means the churches or the mosques or the synagogues or the temples, which have a hierarchy and an organized institutional voice. And the real heart of religion is never seems to engage the political mind, except at a personal level, obviously, in some cases. But I was struck recently, very briefly, by there's a television series put out by Turkish television called Yunus Emre, who was a 13th century Sufi poet, and it's about 40 episodes, and I've never seen anything on television with terrible English subtitles that captures the interior life, the spiritual tradition of a mystical tradition, and presents it so attractively. And interestingly, it became a runaway success in Turkey. The people were hungry for it. So, but there seems to be this hunger for contemplative tradition and contemplative teaching at the popular level even, whereas you know, at the political level it seems to be just not part of the equation. Anyway, so Herman, you've heard a good spectrum of views and questions and thoughts about this crisis. Can you begin to give us your perspective?
I'm not a guru. I'm not a guru, Laurence. So I just can reflect together with you, and I still have more questions than answers. But before I say something on substance, and talking about the role of religion, there was an interesting exchange in the beginning of the refugee crisis between the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and at that time the President of the European Council, my successor Donald Tusk. And it was about Christianity, the term Christianity. And it struck me, the Hungarian was speaking about Christianity versus Islam. So it was in some way the clash of civilizations. And Tusk was responding, saying, I thought it was about the Good Samaritan. So, and this was really the clash between an institutional approach, institutional even more than that. That's a very kind word when I use that word. And the word of Tusk was related to the core of Christianity, between values, so to speak. So this is not a new, not something new, but it was one of the most striking examples. And I'm not sure how that the people perceived all this. It could be that they are much more agreeing with Orban than with Tusk. I don't know. Laurence, you know that I'm always preparing things. So I sent you a short paper. It takes only 5 minutes. And if you allow me, that I will tell you what is in this short paper. And I can do it all the more because some of your remarks are precisely the remarks I already made. It was always good to have some common points before that we really start an exchange. So let us start from a simple fact. And the fact is, and you said it also in the beginning, the conversation with that young lady, there is an increasing lack of trust. That's also the key. That's the key word, trust. You can also speak about faith. And etymologically speaking, in some languages, they are very similar. Trust and faith. You trust your God. So there is an increasing lack of trust in political democracy. And then what is the reason? And you have different kinds of approaches. You have a sociological approach. And of course, sociology is not an exact science. You have a political approach. You have even economic explanations. You have not to be a Marxist to try to explain society by economic factors. But for me, citizens, not all of them, because we have not to generalize. Citizens expect the government to protect them. I think that is the key mission of a state. It was already the case with Hobbes. You have to protect them against aggression coming from outside, and you have to establish order inside. But the role of the state, the role of public authorities, is to protect them from threats, real threats, perceived threats. That's always difficult, and certainly these days. And what are these threats? In a lot of countries, unemployment. In some, as Laurence, which have until recently full employment, but they have insecure jobs. You have this threat of illegal migration, threat of corruption, major inequalities, which is new, pandemics, and is not the last one we will face. Terrorism, again, in the last weeks. In some Eastern European countries, the threat of military invasion after what happened in Ukraine. Of course, you have climate change, and you have this growing feeling, more in the United States than in our countries, but still in our countries too, of cultural minorization. Is Islam not taking over? Are the non-whites taking over the United States? So the impression now is that the governments, in plural sense, not only the European Union, by the way, but the impression is that governments are not delivering. Many feel that they are treated unfairly, also while others are better protected. So there is this, the issue of social injustice is coming to the forefront more, but in general, there is this feeling of the failure of the state, political failure. They are not protecting us sufficiently. And we have to show, even in a contemplative sense, we have to show empathy for that feeling. You have to understand those people. Otherwise, you get nowhere. You're teaching and preaching and so on, but the first thing you have to do is try to understand. And because there is that feeling of a lack of protection, populism is advancing, and it is more popular. Well, populism is much more than just another opposition party. I come back on the issue. It's much more. It's much more than that. The next step is not putting your faith in a populist party. The next step is you put you're losing your faith in democracy as such. And your conversation with that lady, it's something that you find everywhere. According to studies I saw, I forgot the exact number, but it's between 20 and 30% of young people in the United States, but I fear it's also the case in Europe, are losing faith in democracy. So it is more than just losing faith in traditional parties. It's losing faith in our system, in our political democracy, which became one of the key pillars of our civilization. And then I always use also that word anger. And Leonardo mentioned it on several occasions. The anger of dissatisfied citizens goes so far that they don't bother with leaders who are themselves corrupt, vulgar, liars, or simply incompetent. I thought that you have already read my paper, Leonardo, because you're using exactly the same words. As long as they say they tolerate this kind of behavior of the leaders, as long as they say what the people think and feel, as long as they give the right message, they can be what they are. They can be vulgar, they can lie, they can be incompetent, and so on and so on. But they put their trust in those people as long as they give the right message. The majority is the people. And there is only one truth. And the rest doesn't count. It struck me that in the Brexit discussion, they always speak about the people. The people was 52%, and those 48, forget them. I know that democracy, you have to make it work by majority rule, but still. So it is not showing respect for all the others who have another idea of another feeling. Democracy serves to make their ideas or their leader prevail. If that doesn't happen, it's not democratic. And that's what we are living through in the United States these days. And then going further, democracy is then a means to maintain or to conquer power. democracy is then not a value in itself. Ideally speaking, in the democratic system is a system where one looks for solutions together in the name of the common good. But again, the anger is so profound, so deep, that the result counts much more, the result in terms of protection and of fairness, the result counts much more than the process. And if the democracy is not delivering, then it's useless, then it is meaningless. Those angry citizens, not all are angry, but those angry citizens do not believe that politicians are looking for the common good, or even that there is such a thing as the common good, even going one step further. The remedy is to offer that kind of protection. I spoke about empathy. You have always to listen to the needs, even to the anger of people. But the remedy, offering protection, that takes time. And we are living in the time of great impatience. And that takes compromises. The one that is disappointed and angry, that person, asks quick action. And in the sense he wants. A compromise, there's always good and bad, or there's always a mix of what you want and what you don't want. There's always trying to find the right balance between different sensitivities and opinions. Many traditional politicians are afraid to use or defend moderate methods because populism in some countries became so strong. But this is not the case with all of them. One can be successful even if you are strong believers in virtues and values. I'm not saying that the German Chancellor, the French President, President Obama, President Biden are saints, not at all. And I don't think that they consider themselves as saints. But at least they showed political courage against populist parties and leaders. And courage is for me, a cardinal virtue. How does one become so angry that ethics are not important and only one's own right or advantage counts? Is it the fear to lose even more? And as you know, and we discussed it already in other meditation groups, fear is the opposite of hope. So you can be angry, and the anger can be so strong that you are only focused on the topic of the reason of your anger. But the other question is, why are you so angry? Can you not imagine another way to express your dissatisfaction? And that's another question on which we have to reflect. How is it that some have no inner brake anymore on their instincts? Not only among people from so-called lower social classes, but also among highly educated people. So populism or that kind of anger is not a monopoly of some working classes who are left behind in globalization and so on. They lost their jobs. You find it also strongly spread among highly educated people. Why is there sometimes so little inner compass, so much inclination to revenge, so much hostile thinking, so much hate? So that's the real question. You can be, what is the underlying reason why your dissatisfaction turns into anger, and anger forgetting all the rest? Why is there so much inner dissatisfaction, which is then politically translated into aggression? And then does it have to do with the enormous individualization of our civilization? The loss of social capital, that is famous book, I forgot now the author, about the loss of social capital and associative life. The loss of the diminished role of intermediate bodies of all kinds. You have civil society, but civil society related to projects. We have less organized civil society. And my experience with civil society organizations, and in my country they were very strong. They are still strong, but not compared to a few decades ago. But those civilizations, those intermediate bodies, their function was to be a filter. So between the citizen and the leaders of the country, you have this civil society of intermediate organizations, and they try to translate the needs of the people to the political world, knowing that life is complicated and already preparing a compromise. And we lost them because we have this enormous individualization of our civilization. And this is even enhanced, this individualization, by digitization and by social media. Laurence mentioned it already. You don't need a political party anymore, or even a pressure group of an organization of civil society to express your opinion. You do it yourself on Twitter, on Facebook, on all those social media. So there is a direct link between the leader, the so-called leader, and the people. And so there are no filters anymore. There is not this element of moderation in a society. And that's one of the strong points of the current American president. But I have to say that President Obama had more followers on Twitter than President Trump. So you can use social media also for the good. Never forget that. Individualizations brings fear towards others and lack of empathy. When you are falling back on yourself, then you consider very easily the other as a potential enemy. And if others are telling you that this enemy is a threat for you, you are tempted to believe it. And this is one of the consequences of this rising individualization. It brings fear against the others, and of course a lack of empathy. Does it also have to do with the hyper-competitive society in which to lose means the end of the person? So I even noticed it in the language of my children and grandchildren. When they want to say something really nasty about something, they say, it's a loser. Then you are losing, you're losing every respect for him. So losing in a hyper-competitive society is the worst thing that can happen. One may not fail. And that's why the current American president can never admit his loss, because all the time he was speaking about the losers. Now he is a loser himself. That's something that he just cannot admit. He just cannot admit. That's why you will always say that he won, even if he loses, because it is against that kind of culture. Coming back on anger and asking further questions, does it have to do with a superficial way of life, of activism? You have always to do something, even during the weekends. You shouldn't be still. You cannot be nicely at home with your family or with your friends. You have to do something. Has it something to do with a way of looking for pleasure, with little listening, little respect, self-interrogation? Laurence, you use that word. I think somebody else also. Modesty, recognition of fundamental dependency. We are not God, even in the deepest of our heart. We are fundamentally dependent. So my question is, does it have to do with a superficial way of life? And in short, has it to do with a lack of interiority as a counterforce against anger and impatience? And that's a question. I think that it has a lot to do with interiority, but I have let's say, I'm not in my reflection, I'm not at the stage of giving real answers how to re-establish this and how to enhance it. In general, politics is in everything, but not everything is politics, and that's happily so. That's I'm not the inventor of that word. It's a Dutch theologian who the title is of his books. But there's a lot of truth in it. So when we are looking at the current situation, you have to look at it not only from a political perspective and trying to find political solutions. And that's why I immediately said yes to Laurence when he spoke to me about the contemplative path to come out of the crisis. Politics is in everything, but not everything is politics. Living together is based on the sharing of values, of a common destiny, but those values must also have an inner foundation if they are not to withstand storms. If you have not strong foundations in yourself, if you are not a balanced person, if you are not living at ease with yourself and with the surroundings, then you switch immediately from dissatisfaction to anger and to rejecting everything. So this interiority, renewed interiority, is absolute key to overcome the current crisis, which is much more than just a health crisis. I fully agree with the start of our conversation. So the values of a society, they need to be interiorated. Then they are strong. If there is no inner base for them, then they disappear quite quickly, or they can even turn into something negative also very, very rapidly. So for me, and that's not because I'm here in your group, I say this on many occasions last years, what the French would call la vie intérieure, interiority, is absolutely key. And we are missing this. I'm not surprised that in the program you saw that there is that shows that there is a hunger for interiority. Of course, how to make this a mass event? You have always to start somewhere. In the Bible, you have many examples of showing that how can a small plant grow up, and then so on and so on. But there's a long way. The contemplative way, the restoration of some interiority is a long, long way. But it's the crisis of a civilization, and civilizations are they are always long-term movements. It's not you don't change a civilization in a few years, but we are parts of a longer chain of those who try to restore some balance in the hearts and the minds of people, because that's the way to restore balance in society. In Dutch, you can say it in a more subtle way, but in English it sounds a little bit more prosaic. But society is also the sum of interiorities. It's not only that, but it's also that. I'm happy that I prepared a speech, Laurence, so that I can give you my thoughts in a more structured way. But of course, I'm ready to to engage in a conversation. I apologize that it took a little bit longer than you expected.
You are mute, Laurence. You are mute. No.
No, thank you, Herman, very much. I think it was a wonderful overview, and with key questions, and not easy answers, of course. So let's throw it open. Would anyone like to respond? Thomas, your initial comments were pretty skeptical about European institutions. How would you comment on any particular aspect of what?
When I read the first paragraph, I was thinking, where comes the anger from? Because I think anger is just a symptom, and I also ask myself where this claim attitude comes from, and the question is, there is a lot of individualization, but for me, what is getting obvious is that there is also a lack of self-responsibility. So people want to keep their individual character. They get angry, but there is no improvement by themselves, and that's for me a lack of self-responsibility in all fields, or in many fields. That's getting obvious. Yeah. Because of course I can criticize the politics, I can criticize the media, I can criticize the economics, but where is the self-responsibility? And my question is, how can we, or what options do we have to increase the self-responsibility? Because at the end, everybody is responsible for his own. Of course, we have society, we have institutions, but yeah, we have to know who we are and what we want and where we want to be, and that's self-responsibility.
Kira, as listening to Herman and to you now, the story from the Buddha's life in teaching came to my mind, where he is asking, if you're shot on the field of battle with a poison arrow, you don't spend the time asking who shot the arrow. Isn't it a beautiful piece of technology, this arrow? I wonder what kind of poison it is. Asking all these analytical questions, because the poison is getting into your system, so you pull the poison arrow out as quickly as possible. So although we're talking about a contemplative response to this difficult and overwhelming crisis, really, we are, I think, as contemplatives, we are also quite practical about what we can do, what we should do. Does that make sense, Vladimir?
Yes, that makes sense. Actually, yeah, I'm deeply agree with the result of or with the end of the Herman's speech. I think we need this contemplative approach and perspective as a healing process in the society. I'm just afraid that it's not enough, or I'm afraid that it's a very fragile way to do that, because maybe it's lack of my faith, but I feel that let's say this major community who is driven by anger and emotions, and they just want to take a side, and how the Herman said, there are people of one truth. The debate is very, very difficult with them. So I'm just a little bit afraid that the contemplative approach, which it's connected with the silence, with the interior, and with calmness. Let's say it's not a partner in this. Sometimes it's not a partner for this polarized debate. I don't know. It's maybe just my wrong attitude to this situation, but I'm just feeling that it's not enough strong. But maybe it's lack of my faith in the process. I don't know. Maybe the Herman could comment it if you can.
Let's come back. Let's come back to Herman when he's heard our responses. Yeah. All of it. Okay. Maybe Sarah, would you like to comment?
As you were speaking, Vladimir, I guess I was wondering. It's a response. The contemplative response is not, you're right, on the same level as the level that the hostility, the anger, and at one level it's very vulnerable to that. You can get shouted down or overrun, or the monastery gets burnt, or whatever, and that happens. But I guess when you were speaking, I was thinking in the Australian context of Aboriginal people and Aboriginal spirituality, and when the Europeans arrived, it looked like that culture was totally overrun, and it is essentially a contemplative culture that might not practice meditation in the way that we do, but it's essentially a contemplative culture that practices a deep listening to land and to a responsivity to time, and it was totally, it looked like it had been destroyed by this very instrumental, technocratic, dominating European colonizing mindset, and many died, and there was a lot that was lost, but there were elders who were always a part of that tradition, who kept telling the stories, who kept the connection to land, who kept teaching the next generation the significance of this. And we're now at a point where that is starting to flower again, and in fact the dominant culture is looking to Aboriginal ways of knowing to help us Europeans learn how to live in this land. After the bushfires, there's a lot of talk of Aboriginal ways of knowing and living on country. And I guess I wonder, so it operates at a different level, and it survives, not without suffering and not without great loss, but there's something to be kept alive, which when that dominant culture peters out or runs out of its own resources, it looks to that. And I wonder if part of what the role of the contemplative is in the context that we're talking about is to keep alive and to keep faith with our connection, as we believe, what is a truer way of living, a truth about life. And it will be overrun at times, and it will look lost. But in the end, if it's true and connected to the real, in the end, it will prove to be what's needed.
We had the John Main seminar this year was Indigenous Wisdom for Our Time, and it was very powerful, amazing. We had people from the Southern Hemisphere, people from South America, people from North America, representing indigenous cultures there. And it wasn't an idealization of those cultures,
no,
but there's clearly and what came up in all of them was facing the sin of colonialism, which was a long time ago, but it's still, well, not so long ago in terms of civilization, I suppose. And maybe part of what we're going through is is dealing with our karma and dealing with the consequences of our actions over previous generations. But at the same time, this meeting or this encounter between modern, urban, educated people and indigenous peoples, sometimes they're not, they can be in both sides, but with indigenous culture, did seem in that seminar, did seem to breathe hope. It was a new way. I was thinking also of, John Main. John Main says that meditation creates community, and we've seen that. The world community is here, the WCCM. But I think it's more than just creating a particular contemplative. I think it also generates in the mind of the meditator a sense of communion with others, and that is an expanding sense. The longer and the deeper you meditate, the more you feel in communion with, and therefore the less likely or possible it is for you to act as this angry, destructive, populist kind of leader or follower. And also I think out of the contemplative experience, the problem is, I think Vladimir is correct, it's a small minority, tiny minority, but there is more interest in this probably at a popular level than ever before. And there's a lot of levels at which this contemplative wisdom is being expressed. Some of it's a bit commercialized and so on. But I think what this contemplative consciousness does also generate is a certain kind of intelligence or rationality. And what we're experiencing today in this crisis is a huge level of irrationality, often deliberately generated by leaders who think that the best way they can maintain power is to create chaos. I mean, creating chaos is, if you're good at negotiating chaos and manipulating people, it's a great way to stay in power, I suppose. And that is unleashing, the horses of the apocalypse, because irrationality on that scale is ultimately totally self-destructive. So anyway, sorry, Leo, did you like to comment?
I was going to comment a bit what you said about community. So if we think what can we do, and when we meditate, we create community even spontaneously. And a word that Herman uses a lot is this individualization, and this problem that we are a lot on the phone. So we are isolated in a way more and more, especially if we use technology in that way. And I think we became very easily target for these campaigns. Let's say if you mentioned the film, The Social Dilemma, there's the other movie about the Cambridge Analytica, and how they use these to elect people. So we can think if democracy is possible in this context. And I think it is possible if we go back to community. If we are able to do this, maybe small scale work, but plant the seeds of going back to this feeling that I'm not alone, so I don't need to be angry. I have other people to go with me, and then could be a way to be more civilized.
One of the big challenges is to reconcile the values of globalization, the benefits that brings, with our need to be local, our need for roots, as Simone Weil called it. And part of this populism seems to have been that the benefits of globalization were not being distributed fairly. And so there was a resentment and an anger about that. The rich were getting very, very, very rich, and the poor was having to take on more jobs in order to survive. And so the sense of being a local, having local roots, knowing your neighbors, spending time with them, having intelligent conversations with them, letting your children play with them, local roots, local community, which is quite strong here in France, actually, stronger than anyway. But that seems to be in complete contradiction almost to the juggernaut of globalization. That creates confusion, I suppose, and maybe we're just in the process, or maybe it's not working. That's what we don't know. Are we working something out and we'll get there in the end, or is this approach not working? And do we have to reconcile ourselves in the face of an environmental crisis, which is a terminal point? Do we have to reconcile ourselves to a completely different kind of economy, where things are scaled down, and we keep essential things like the internet and good roads and electric cars, and we keep the essential things, but we reduce our luxuries and our waste and our, a lot of our cultural addictions and indulgences. But I don't know if you're going to get. Would you get elected on that platform, Herman?
But Laurence and I can call you dear friends. We have to acknowledge that we are living in a transition period on all fronts. Geopolitically, with the rise of new countries, 30 years, 40 years ago, China was a backward country. Now it's the leading economy in the world. Transition in climate change, transition also in the very nature of our democracies, and we have also a transition from in Western Europe from a Christian continent to a continent in religious indifference, or with even religious / cultural fight, referring to the radical Islam. And so on many fronts, you are living in a period of transition. And there are no easy solutions for that. There's a change also of our, what I call our civilization. And don't expect quick solutions and quick answers, and don't expect quick results from all what we are doing, even in the WCCM. But that should not discourage us to go ahead, because that's the least thing you can do, is to fall into some kind of despair or pessimism. No, we are in the midst of a storm, and nobody knows how this will end. My second reflection is we shouldn't fall into another trap, saying we are the good ones, and why are the others so angry? Why are the others so bad? And that's some kind of moral superiority. We have seen the light and the others are in the dark. The right approach is, in my view, is why are the others in the dark? What is the reason? And that was one of the let's say the objectives of my reflections, and I have not yet the real answer. But the wrong mentality is the mentality of there are parts of our society composed of people who are becoming or are already bad people, and we will teach them the right way. So that would be against a word that I like very much, the word of empathy. Compassion is too paternalistic, but you have to put you in the place of the others and try to understand their anger and the problems they have. So of course we have to fight also on the short term. And what you say, joking, can you be elected on that platform? Of course not. But I am not hopeless in that respect too, in the sense that you see that you can be a moderate person, an authentic person, a non-corrupt person, somebody who explains what the solutions are and how difficult problems are, and you can be brilliantly elected in a lot of countries. And so not all leaders, or not an overwhelming majority of the people, is in despair. It's growing numbers, and we have to listen carefully and to give answers to it. But there is also still a silent majority of people who are looking for the good and know that the solutions are not the solutions of aggressiveness, polarization, anger, racism, intolerance, because all this will end in conflict and in war. So moderation, authenticity is still lively present in our societies. The trends are not going always in the right direction, and we have to work very hard on all fronts, as I said, to keep people on the right path. That's a little bit paternalistic too, but there's you have a responsibility as a leader to come up, to show your convictions and saying what kind of direction you have in mind. You know, democracy is always a tension between bottom up and top down. So you have to listen, but at the same time, you have to give a direction, an orientation. You have to show leadership. You have to show leadership. If you listen too much, you are just doing nothing. Because in our societies, you have so many opinions, so many sensitivities, that at the end, you did a great work, but as a leader, not only in politics, but also in all kinds of communities, associations, companies, and so on, you have to at a certain moment to show the direction. Of course, if you are not followed, then you have a problem. That's why it is so important to invest a lot in dialogue. Also a key word for us. So this. I'm not a desperate person, not at all, because I see that the forces of moderation, of authenticity, can still be strong, although some tendencies, or a lot of tendencies in our societies, are worrying me. Just one word about what I think it was Thomas who spoke about self-responsibility. That's a footnote. Depends on what you understand on that word, because I see what you mean. That in our societies there is this temptation to stress more your rights than your duties, and that's of the individualization that you are always asking things from others and not asking enough from yourself. What is my contribution to the common good? The state has to provide the common good. And so when they deliver, then I haven't to take any responsibility regarding my neighbors and my fellow human beings. That's the role of the state. So there is this role of each person. I like to speak much more about a person than about an individual. If you have this in mind, I fully agree with you. We fully agree with you. But this self-responsibility, that's a little bit strange, is an answer to the rising individualization. You have to take your own responsibility, but the rising individualization is to put your responsibility at another level, to push it away, and you are only on the demanding side. So you should also be on the delivering side. But then the real question is, and that had to be part of the exercise. The real question is, how can we strengthen people so that they are looking also on their duties, looking for their duties, and taking up their own responsibility regarding others? How do we make people stronger? And that's my message was, by strengthening their interior life, their interiority, because otherwise you feel terribly alone. And when you are more in balance with yourself, you reach out to others, because you cannot take action alone. You need others. But in somebody who is only falling back on itself, for them the other is an enemy. If you have a strong interior life, the other can be an ally, a friend, somebody that you like or love. And so interior life is community building, so to speak. And in order to give people the let's say the sufficient strength to be more self-responsible, you have to make them more self-confident. And you become more self-confident when you work on your inner life. There's no contradiction. There's no contradiction at all. And that's let's say the strong point of meditation. That's why I'm so much seduced by meditation, is that you discover. And I said to Laurence also a few weeks ago, for me it's even a physical experience, that you discover that you become milder, showing more empathy after meditation. And meditation is you do it mostly alone, but the fallout of meditation is that for the others become much more. They can become much closer to you than in the past. It's an element of community building. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, maybe we could just end with us just going around with a final word or a comment upon what this conversation has, what we felt about this conversation, just briefly, so that we can conclude. And of course, thank everyone, and Herman especially, for what we've heard and what we've shared and contributed. But maybe just end with a short concluding comment or sense of what you felt during this conversation. Vlad, you're mute, unmute.
Well, Well, thank you very much that you share with us your experience. Actually, it was very enriching for me, and maybe I will leave with strength and hope in the process, which is not so maybe so obvious. And you, Herman, spoke about the empathy and the patience. So I think that's what we need to bring to the society, which is very divided. So yes, it's not really my feeling is it's not really quick and easy process, but it's worth to take a part, and it's worth to want to do something with it. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I also agree. I agree with Vlad. It's we are finishing this conversation. I'm feeling with hope, more hope. If it's in the not only in the political aspect, but in general. When Herman, you mentioned meditation bring us closer to other. So I think that's what we need. If we start trying to analyze the global picture, the polarization, we get we can get despair, we can get out of hope, but I think it was a good to hear everyone and to feel that it's possible. It is not easy. It's always a work in progress, but I think it's possible to build bridges, trying to connect and this feeling of connection is not romanticized. It comes from our experience, this inner experience, and is truth. It's truth. So thank you, thank you, everyone.
Thomas?
Thank you very much. For me, the last part of the statement of Mr. Van Rompuy summarized the whole topic very well. The question for me is how can the individual can be strengthened, and it's very important to be strong inside in order to be able to make friends. Otherwise, you see threats and enemies all around you, and that's what we have to care about, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yes, similar from me. I find really helpful that notion of strengthening the interiority, and it's I guess there's a sense that interior serenity and also spaciousness is where we host one another, and so that's that's important. And as for with Leo and Vladimir, that sense that this is it's a humble work, and we stay close to the ground, and we work where we are doing the next thing. That's part of it too, that I'm feeling encouraged in. So thank you from me too.
So Herman, there we are. Thank you. I think we've all felt more hope and clarity. And I read yesterday that they asked Obama whether he thought he would go back into Biden's cabinet. And he said, no, absolutely not. He said, my wife would leave me if I did. So I think I'm a bit torn between wanting you to go back into politics and also grateful that you're out of politics because you've got time to share the fruit of your reflection and wisdom experience in such a fresh way and a sort of moderate way. Just before we had this meeting, I was at our regular morning meeting with our community here at Bonneau on the rule of Saint Benedict, and I think in every chapter on the rule, which we discuss day by day, you find this principle of moderation. And at first that sounds like compromise, or sounds like it's avoiding ideals, or moderation sounds a bit dull. But when you see it in practice, and what Sarah was saying about doing it at the grassroots level, you realize it is a very sharp sword, the spirit of moderation, and it's a sharp blade that cuts through our tendency to lie to ourselves, or what happens in populism, I think, to want to believe the lies you're being told, which is even worse. But this spirit of moderation, which I think you expressed beautifully in your reflections, is a very, in a way, unforgiving blade that cuts between truth and illusion. Well, thank you all very much. I think it's been a local gathering, multi-local and global all together. So thank you very much for your time, and
thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful show.
Thank you.
Right.
See you.
Thank you.
See you
Bye-bye.
another occasion. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Herman, again, especially.
Thank you.